Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Advancement Center and the continued reading of The Magic of Life by Robert Young, Volume 1. And we continue with Chapter 48. Willem had a little trouble finding Andrew Kelly when he arrived at Olson Plaza. He remembered that he had a den somewhere downstairs, but when he tried to gain access to Andrew through the front desk, they would not put him through. Normally, Willem would have talked directly to Henry, so he asked to speak to Henry. The staff told him that Henry was not there. He thought it was a bit strange because Willem had held first place in every area in town for so long. Some of his friends were away and yet nobody knew him. He stood for a while and wondered what he could do, and then he remembered that Mary knew everybody at Olson Plaza, and everybody knew Mary. Willem asked, "Can you place a call to Mary for me, please?" "Mary who?" came the reply. "Mary Smithers," said Willem. The two attendants looked at one another as Willem said, "Henry's Mary?" Both of the attendants said, "Oh, you know, Henry's Mary." "I'm Mary's father," said Willem. "Now just place the call." "I'm sorry, sir. We didn't know," said the staff as their faces turned red with embarrassment. "Who is it you wanted to see?" "Andrew, the technician," said Willem. "Andrew Kelly?" "Just one moment, sir," said the first attendant as he quickly made the call to Andrew. You could hear Andrew's voice over the phone. He had a loud voice. "He probably won't be able to find me down here, so I'll come up. I won't be a minute. Just send him down the corridor to the elevator." The attendant took the message and politely said to Willem, "If you come this way, sir, Mr. Kelly will meet you at the lift." Willem followed the attendant to the lift at the end of the corridor. The attendant stood almost to attention while they waited. When the doors opened, Andrew stood inside and was about to move out when the attendant held the door and said, "Mr. Kelly, this is Mr. Andrew immediately stepped forward and said, "Hi, Willem. Get yourself in the lift." He thanked the attendant and off they went. On the way down, there was a lot of conversation between Andrew and Willem. Willem once again passed on his ideas, and Andrew tried to add as much as he could to the possibilities. When they reached Andrew's workshop, the radio was already operating. It was John calling Andrew. Andrew turned to Willem and asked, "Did you tell him you were coming?" Willem laughed. Andrew picked up the receiver, answering, "John receiving. This is Andrew." "Oh, Andrew," said John, "I have a few extra visitors here, and we really need something to keep them active. I thought you might have some work around the plaza or something that we can occupy them with, something that can be repaid with food and supplies." Andrew laughed before replying, "John, this is Andrew. I have Willem here with me. Do you remember Willem Smithers?" "Yes, I do," said John. "How are you, Willem?" Willem took the receiver and replied, "John, it's a funny thing, but I had the thought that maybe you could supply some people to help us with the recovery of the roads and power and the stabilizing of a few buildings. There's probably about 2 months' work for as many people as you can get. I'm sure that we can come to some arrangement with supplying food and lodging and the rest of it." "Lodgings are no problem," said John. "They'll travel back here every day. We'll bring them around by boat. How does 6 to 8 people suit you?" "6 to 8 people would be fine," said Willem. "I could take more if you can supply them, but they have to be good. They have to have a bit of ingenuity, and they have to have a bit of know-how. You know, the type of people who would work for you. It's not just a laboring job either. It will be taking something on and seeing it through to the finish." "I'm sure they can do that," answered John, "but they'll need some leadership. Somehow I think that will come to you before long." Willem was a little mystified by that last statement, and he replied, "John, I'd like to know why you feel that." "I'll put Willie on," said John. Willie got on the radio and said, "Hi, Willem. This is Willie. Do you remember me from Willie and John Boltage?" "Yes, I remember you," said Willem. "How are you?" "Well, it's a funny thing, Willem, but I spent some time talking to young Bill Summers the other day. and he told me about his involvement with you and how you were teaching him things. That young fellow is still floating around in front of my face, and as soon as John began talking, I saw a picture of him. I wouldn't be surprised if he turns up out of nowhere and starts to run all of this. He's capable, you know. Willem smiled as he heard this and said, "It's funny, Willie, but I'm of the same opinion. I just wonder if Bill knows." "I think you'll find he does," answered Willie. "So don't be surprised if he turns up out of nowhere." "I'll be looking forward to it," said Willem. "So can we count on your blokes getting underway within a day or so?" "You can count on them," said Willie. "I'll be back home by this afternoon, and I'm sure if I don't see Bill, then you will. So for now, over and out." "Over and out," repeated Willem. Andrew looked at Willem and said, "There's something going on, Willem. Everybody seems to know there's something happening." "There certainly is. There's something in the air," replied Willem. "I'll keep you up to date, but the big thing is we have to get back. We have to get this place back in order, and we have to get a few other things back in order." "That's right. Henry and I need to get a few things in order as well," said Andrew. "If you don't do it today, we may not be able to supply people with the lodgings that they require." Willem tilted his head and said, "Andrew, I don't know how many people have said that to me today. There's something in the air. Let's see what it turns out to be by this evening." He then turned and walked out the door without assistance and without saying goodbye. Andrew was not at all surprised because he knew how clear Willem was when he made a decision. When he left, Andrew felt quite okay. As Willem left the plaza, Henry appeared at the gate. Willem waved at Henry, and Henry returned the wave. Then Willem put his head down, ready to walk off, and Henry waved again. He held his hands up for Willem to stop. Willem wasn't really in the mood to stop. He took another couple of steps, and Henry waved his arms again. This time Willem stopped and waited as Henry approached. Willem felt a sensation that he hadn't felt for a long time. He recognized the sensation as an aftermath of Simeon's presence. He simply asked Henry, "What did he say?" Henry was used to these pointed statements from Willem that assumed he was supposed to know all about everything. Henry replied, "Do you mean Simeon?" "Of course," said Willem. "He said many things and he posed many options," said Henry, "and it looks like you and Bill Summers are right in the middle of it all." Willem half grinned and half sighed. "I thought it was happening. So where's Bill?" "I left him heading back home," said Henry. "Are you sure?" asked Willem. "Yes, I'm sure," said Henry. "I can feel Bill heading this way," said Willem. "I had that same feeling myself, but I did see him going in the other direction," said Henry. "Oh, well, you never know. It certainly looks like Bill is the key to a lot of things that are going on today," said Willem. Henry nodded. "I think you're right." Chapter 49. Willie was almost ready to leave. The Jeremy had already pulled up anchor and was ready to get underway when Bill's face appeared in front of him again. This time it was so close that it made him take a step back. As he took up the strain against the tide, he felt a change within himself, and he knew that something critical was attached to the vision of Bill. He just didn't know what it was. Then as he pushed the throttle forward, Bill's face flashed again. This time Willie could see him heading towards Norwich, and he said to himself, "Wow, that hasn't happened to me before. I really need to see this Bill again. When I get closer to Norwich, I'll check to see if he's coming in." He pushed harder on the throttle, and a faint image of Bill stayed with him all the way. No matter what he did, the image kept flashing in his mind. As the Jeremy rounded the headland, the radio burst to life. It was the Olsen Plaza, and it was Andrew on the radio trying to raise John. Willie knew that John would be busy and would not be in his hut, so he took the call. Olsen Plaza, this is the Jeremy, Willie speaking. Olsen Plaza, this is Andrew. Just calling to tell John that we have a feeling Bill Summers is on his way." "That's great. I had the same feeling," said Willie. "Can you organize a berth for me? I'm heading towards Norwich and should be there within the hour." Roger, said Andrew. Looking forward to seeing you. Same accommodations as usual, Willie? Same accommodations would be perfect. Thanks, Andrew, answered Willie. I'll stay the night, just one night, and that's all. Consider it done, said Andrew. Olson Plaza, over and out. Jeremy, over and out, replied Willie. Chapter 50. Bill's progress was swift, to say the least. He had never felt himself move so quickly, and it felt like time had no say in his trip to Norwich. He was amazed at the presence of Suzanne on the entire trip, as she now spoke to him constantly. It was almost like she was beside him, and the conversation was light and joyful. She told him all sorts of things about his future. She explained to him how the two of them would work together and how they would venture out into all sorts of areas, both in the world of Norwich and in the world they knew so well, the world of simplicity. Suzanne also described how they would change and how they would bring support to those who are living on the better part of the island, but who are also under the most pressure. She talked of how the beauty of the island and the harshness would be separated, and how the hardship would disappear out of the people's lives. Suzanne told Bill how he would lead many things, and that he would lead people in all sorts of ventures and in areas that he had never even dreamt of, and that this would begin immediately. The encouragement from Suzanne continued for the whole trip, and by the time Bill arrived at the gate, which was the entrance to Norwich, he was feeling rather tall and incredibly capable. In fact, he remembered the saying that he felt 10 feet tall. He even ducked as he walked through the gate before having a laugh at himself, because in fact, he was not at all very tall in stature. As Bill walked through the park, he remembered very clearly which way to go to get to Mary's house. He knew Willem should be there at this time. Bill walked swiftly across the park, and then something made him stop suddenly. He could feel something, but he did not know what it was. He was about to turn left and head towards Mary's house, but he had been stopped, and he did not know why. He stood still for a moment to feel what was happening and was told to turn right instead of left. Bill hesitated because he did not know what was ahead of him. If he turned right and didn't know where he would be going. It was getting close to dark, but the force was too strong to ignore, and he had to go with every feeling that was coming to him at the time. As he turned, the face of Willem appeared in front of him. In the distance, he could see the figure of a man, but he was not sure why he was focused on that man, as the face of Willem would not go away. Bill moved forward, though not quite as quickly as he would have if he was still heading towards Mary's house or Willem's house as it was now. Bill did not know that it was now Willem's house, although he had a feeling that it was. Within a couple of minutes, Bill had almost caught up with the figure in front of him, and he soon recognized the walk and the stature of the man up ahead. It was Willem. Bill increased his pace, and before long, he had caught up to Willem. He tapped him on the shoulder, and Willem stopped and turned around. The look of surprise on his face was indescribable. He had expected to see Bill at some stage, but not have Bill come up and tap him on the shoulder. He wondered how Bill could have found him. After all, he had decided to wander the streets for a while before he went back home. He had decided to let everything sink in with him, what was happening to him, where he had to go, what he was supposed to do, and then out of nowhere came Bill. The words that had been spoken earlier, that Bill might turn up out of nowhere, certainly came true. Bill's eyes were bright, and Willem could feel the energy coming from him. He could put it down to the fact that Bill had just walked quite a way and that he was totally energized, but he knew that it was more than that. Something had happened to Bill, and he was so much more vibrant than Willem had ever seen him. He placed his hand on Bill's shoulder in an act to calm him down and felt a buzz that he was feeling for the first time. "Wow, Bill, you're really firing, aren't you?" remarked Willem. "Yes, I think I am," Willem answered. a smiling Bill. I went to your shop, but I'd forgotten that you were still here. So I went back home, and Suzanne told me I had gone in the wrong direction. Sure enough, I think she was right. So here I am. And I think it's pretty important that we talk, if that's all right with you. Willem put his arm around Bill. Of course, it's all right with me, son. Any time is all right with me. Come on, and we'll go back to the house and get a bite to eat and have a bit of a talk about what's happening. That would be good, said Bill. I really want to look at the finances and what's happening with that. Willem raised his eyebrows. Bill didn't even know what money was a couple of weeks ago, and now he was talking about finances. Something had really happened to Bill. The walk back to the house was interesting. Willem carefully questioned Bill on everything he could and found that there was very little that he had to add to the knowledge that Bill had already gathered. Somehow the work of Simon Guthridge had taken Bill well past what Simon knew, and Willem knew about that because he was very close to Simon, and he knew Simon's limitations. But Bill had no limitations, and his ability to think well past what Simon knew was amazing. As Willem thought to himself, he realized that Bill could not be thinking it. He did not have that knowledge to think with. One of his last questions to Bill before they walked inside the house was, Bill, where did you get all of this information from? Bill's answer was very simple. He said, I don't know. Willem laughed and said, well, I thought that must have been the case because you're too good for me. You know more about this stuff than I do. Actually, I don't know anything about anything, said Bill, but as I speak, it seems to come out. Willem patted Bill on the shoulder and said, well done, Bill, and don't you ever change that, and don't you try to learn anything. All you need to learn is the lingo, the stuff we use to describe what you know. Bill knew that was true and answered, thank you very much, Willem. Nobody has ever said anything like that to me before, and I think it's very important that I at least have somebody who can support the fact that all I need is what you call the lingo. The rest of it seems to come to me, and if someone asks me to do something, then all I have to do is get a bit of a description, and I don't have any problems with it. It all seems to come to me. Willem's excitement was such that he could hardly open the door. By the time he got it open, Mary had arrived at the door. Once again, this surprised Willem because he didn't think she would still be there. Willem's surprise was obvious when Mary opened the door at the same time that Willem pushed on it. The door flung open quickly and Willem almost fell through on top of Mary. Mary began to laugh and pointed at Willem. Look at you. You look like a little boy who has just been caught doing something wrong. Willem grinned and replied, funny thing is, that's what I feel like as well. Mary wrapped her arms around him and said, you always surprise me, Dad. She then extended one of her arms out to Bill and said, come here, Bill. You do so much for Dad. He just looks so good when you're around. She gave them both a big hug, and they all felt so comfortable together. They stayed there together for quite a while before Willem broke the silence by saying, this feels beautiful. We'll have to do it more often. Everybody agreed, and Willem continued, well, Mary, it seems like you're being kept here for a reason. I suppose it could be that you're going to cook us something nice. I'll do that for you, said Mary happily. No problem at all, Dad. Willem asked Mary, so where's your boyfriend? Where's Mr. Henry Olson? Well, I think he's still tied up at the office, answered Mary. Too much work and not enough play. When are you going over to his house? He asked. He's going to come and get me, Dad, answered Mary. Said Willem. Looks like something is being planned here. Looks like we're all going to meet up for some reason. I wonder who else is involved. Bill stood there with his eyes wide open and his face aglow. He didn't say a word. Mary asked, Bill, do you know what this is all about? I have no idea, Mary, he replied, but it feels good. I think Willem has somehow picked up on what's happening. We all seemed to be coming together to talk about something. Did you hear what happened to Dad? She asked Bill. No, answered Bill. Old Harvey, the town clerk, has asked Dad to stand in for him for a little while so Harvey can start the repairs on the town. Wow, that would be interesting, said Bill. I think it's interesting, said Willem, but I think the most interesting thing is that you turned up here. Bill smiled and agreed. Yeah, that's interesting as well, isn't it? Particularly when I'm just standing here not knowing what I'm doing, but I feel really good. Then, with a sudden rush, the door opened and in walked Henry. He looked in and said, Oh, you're here, Bill. Hi, Willem. Mary, how are you, my love? Mary rushed over to greet Henry, but before she could get to the door, another person walked in behind Henry. It was Harvey, the town clerk, who was quickly followed by Michael and Elizabeth Willis, the judge and the town council itself. The small foyer was soon filled in a matter of moments with people. Even Henry was surprised to see the unexpected arrival of all these people. He didn't know that they were right behind him. Harvey, in his usual gruff voice, spoke first. What the hell's going on here? I just came over to say hello and came over to have a quick yarn to Willem, and now we've got half the town here. He turned to Elizabeth and Michael. Hi there, Michael and Elizabeth. What gripe have you got here tonight? Michael took a quick playful swing at Harvey as if he was about to fight him. Harvey stepped back before Michael said, One day you'll forget to step back, Harvey, and I'll get you. We don't have anything to whine about. Hello, everyone. Elizabeth and I are here to sort a few things out, but it's funny that you're all here at the same time. We all need to hear what Elizabeth has to say, so I hope you don't mind if we gate crash whatever's happening here. I don't think anybody's great gate crashing, said Willem, but I don't think anybody knows who's organized this. Do any of you know? They all looked at each other, but there was no reply. I thought so, said Willem. It's one of those setups again. We better just go with the flow and follow whatever happens. Willem gathered everyone and invited them all into the house. Come on, everyone. In you come. Mary, do you think you have enough to feed everyone? Mary smiled as Elizabeth said, You can't leave all this to Mary. Here, hold all this paperwork, Michael. I'll give Mary a hand in the kitchen. Elizabeth handed over a large bundle of papers to Michael before rushing away to the kitchen to help Mary prepare a meal for everyone. The feeling of excitement in the air was high, but there was also a slight sense of awkwardness. Nobody knew what to say or what to do. Bill just stood there with a huge smile on his face while Willem attempted to bring everything together, but nothing would work. Finally, Henry spoke up. The most unusual thing about this whole meeting is young Bill turning up and the fact that we all sort of knew that he would. So, Bill, what do you think has to happen here? Without a thought, Bill replied, What Elizabeth has to say is the most important thing. What Michael has to do follows, and then what Harvey has in mind will follow that. His clarity surprised everyone. Willem looked at Bill in amazement and asked, Okay, Bill, so what comes after that? Bill answered, I don't know, Willem, but I know that I came here to talk to you about finances and what that means. I don't know at this point. I do know that it's very important, though. Then from the kitchen came the voice of Elizabeth. Right-o, you lot. Get yourselves in here if you want something to eat. We're serving it all now. All of a sudden, it was like everybody had been snapped out of some trance, and they all came in at once, although they looked around at each other before getting up to respond to Elizabeth's request. There was no thought of what they had been talking about, but in the moment, they changed mode and found themselves in the regular world and were hungry. They each made their way to the kitchen, found themselves a chair, and sat themselves down ready to eat. Elizabeth served the meal while Mary continued preparing more food. It was as if they had timed it perfectly. The last meal was served as Mary returned to the table with a meal for herself and one for Elizabeth. There was a wonderful feeling around the table, and it was quite different to what they had experienced in the sitting room. As Mary took her seat, she said, All I can say is welcome, everyone. and I'll be really interested in what's going to happen later. But for now, I would like you to all enjoy your meal and stay as lighthearted as you are at the moment. Hear, hear, replied Willem. Everyone then began talking at the same time. From a distance, and for a few minutes, it sounded like a crowd of 50 or so people, but then it quieted down as they each started to eat. Bill stood up and announced, I want to thank you all for playing out your role in whatever is happening here at the moment. I also wish to thank Simeon for pulling us all together. Everybody looked at Bill, and one by one they smiled in recognition that what he was saying was correct. The occasional knowing nod came from each person. Bill finished off by saying, I know it's a special time, and I know this is a special meal. So a big thank you to Mary and Elizabeth. Thanks also to Willem for having us in your home. Willem quickly responded, as did Mary and Elizabeth, before they all got on with their meal. And that takes us up to chapter 51, which I will continue reading the next time. And until then, I wish you a perfect life, perfect health, and a magic future. Thank you.